WNBA, they look at these players like a joke. To be fair, why shouldn't they? These players are demanding 30% of league revenue prior to expenses being paid. The players that have never driven in viewership, the players that have never brought in attendance, the players that have in the making, since the players union decided to put out a hype tape, a hype video of them saying, "We deserve more. We're opting out." As the deadline passed on January 9th, the sides ushered in a period called status quo, where the conditions of the 2020 deal remain in effect. In the 3 weeks since, the stalemate has continued. The Women's National Basketball Players Association is still awaiting an official response from the league since sending in a
That laugh says everything you need to know about where WNBA negotiations stand right now. Because while you were watching Caitlin Clark highlights and celebrating record-breaking ratings, behind closed doors, the entire 2026 season just moved from unlikely to nearly impossible. The WNBA Players Association submitted their CBA proposal a month ago, January 2025. And the league's response? Complete radio silence. Not a counteroffer, not a negotiation meeting, nothing. Here's what nobody's connecting yet. The players are demanding 30% of gross revenue before expenses are paid in a league that's lost money for 28 consecutive years. And the owners aren't just saying no. They're not even dignifying it with a response. Because from their perspective, this isn't a negotiation proposal, it's a punchline. If you believe the story behind the story matters, if you think someone needs to cut through the noise and explain what's actually happening while everyone else celebrates surface-level wins, hit that like button. It tells us we're on the right track, because this situation is way more dire than anyone's letting on. Let's lay out exactly what's at stake here. May 8th, 2026. That's when the WNBA season is supposed to tip off. Between now and then, the league needs to conduct a 2-team expansion draft for Portland and Toronto. More than 100 unrestricted free agents need contracts. The entire 2026 draft class needs to be placed on rosters. None of that happens without a collective bargaining agreement in place. Not the expansion, not free agency, not the draft. The clock is ticking and one side won't budge while the other side won't even respond. But here's what makes this particularly absurd, and many of you have been pointing this out in the comments for weeks. The players opted out of their 2020 deal 15 months ago. 15 months. They put out that dramatic hype video in October 2023, all cinematic and empowering, saying, "We deserve more, we're opting out, this is our moment." The deadline passed on January 9th, 2025, and the league entered what's called status quo, where the conditions of the old 2020 deal just continue indefinitely. So for 15 months now, they've been operating under the same contract they said wasn't good enough. And in that entire span, how many serious proposals have been exchanged? Apparently not enough to warrant a response from the league when the players submitted their latest version a month ago. Reading between the lines reveals something critical here. This isn't like the 2020 negotiations where Cathy Engelbert and the Players Union president stood side by side, both wearing coordinated blue outfits, smiling for cameras. Engelbert said, back then, "We're so proud of the players and their ability to unify around important issues. We came together, we collaborated, and we have what we think is a groundbreaking agreement." That was the vibe in 2020. Collaboration, partnership, mutual respect. Fast forward to 2025, and Nafisa Collier is publicly calling out Cathy Engelbert during her exit interview. That doesn't happen in a healthy relationship. The behind-closed-doors dissatisfaction has spilled into public view. And now you've got players who fundamentally don't trust league leadership to negotiate in good faith. The collaborative energy from 2020 has evaporated completely. So what changed? You were onto something when you noticed the tone shift after Caitlin Clark's rookie season. The batteries in their backs, as one commentator put it. They've had 2 years of respectable viewership metrics and attendance numbers, largely driven by one generational talent. And suddenly, they think they have leverage. They think they can demand NBA-style revenue splits and NBA-style perks and NBA-style everything. But here's the uncomfortable context everyone keeps dancing around. The WNBA has operated at a loss for 3 decades, not 3 years, 3 decades. You know what happens to normal businesses that lose money for 30 consecutive years. They fold. They go bankrupt. They cease to exist. But the WNBA doesn't run out of money because Big Brother NBA keeps writing checks, subsidizing operations, covering losses, year after year after year. And now the players want 30% of gross revenue. Not net revenue after you pay for travel, facilities, staff, marketing, and everything else that keeps a professional sports league running. Gross revenue, before expenses, in a league that loses money every single year, which means there's nothing left to split after you actually pay for operations. The league has countered with an offer of 70% of net revenue over the life of the agreement, which sounds generous until you realize net revenue in a league that loses money means you're splitting 0, or worse, negative numbers. It's not a real offer when the pie doesn't exist. Let's filter out the noise and focus on the economic reality here. ESPN reported that one of the major sticking points is housing. The players want guaranteed housing for everyone. Full season, all players, no exceptions. Now look at the comparison. NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, MLB. None of them provide season-long housing. 0. The NWSL is actively phasing out team-provided housing by 2027. They're moving away from it because professional athletes in other leagues are expected to afford their own housing with their professional salaries. But the WNBA players want it for everyone, regardless of salary, which tells you something about how they view themselves compared to every other professional league. The league has apparently offered a compromise. They'll provide housing for players on non-guaranteed contracts and players in expensive markets who don't make high salaries. If you're making 6 figures, buy your own place. If you're on a camp contract making 30 grand, okay, we'll help you out. That seems reasonable, right? The players said no. They want universal housing, which brings us back to the core issue. Every proposal from the owners includes more money, more benefits, more concessions, and every response from the players is, but we want 30% gross revenue. We're not compromising on that. One player literally had to explain to ESPN that negotiation requires compromise. Think about that. A player had to spell out that negotiations involve give and take, which tells you the players haven't been doing much giving. Here's where it gets really revealing. And I need you to drop your thoughts in the comments on this because it's the heart of everything. When you had 46,000 fans watching instead of millions, you could tell those fans things were hunky-dory when they really weren't. You could spin the narrative. You could make losing $30 million a year sound like growth and investment. But now, people are actually watching. Not just die-hard fans, not just people who get paid to cover the league, regular people who think for themselves. They're following these negotiations and asking basic questions. Wait, why is the NBA still subsidizing this? Why are you asking for 30% of revenue when you've never made a profit? Maybe you should go do your own thing and see how that works out. Those are fair questions. And the silence from the league suggests they're asking themselves the same things. So we're in this bizarre standoff. The players keep submitting essentially the same proposal with minor adjustments, like changing the word toy to Lego and expecting a different answer. The owners keep saying no, or in this case, not even responding. And nobody's budging because both sides think they have leverage. The players think they have leverage because of ratings and attendance. 2 years of respectable metrics. Caitlin Clark bringing mainstream attention, sold-out arenas, playoff games on ABC. For the first time in WNBA history, casual sports fans could actually name more than 2 players. That feels like leverage. That feels like power. That feels like, finally, we can demand what we deserve. But the owners know they have different leverage. Economics, sustainability, 3 decades of financial data that says this league exists because the NBA allows it to exist, not because it's profitable, not because it's self-sustaining, because the NBA subsidizes it as part of their broader basketball ecosystem, and voici let's be honest, social responsibility initiatives. The moment the NBA decides that subsidy isn't worth it anymore, the WNBA folds. That's the leverage the owners have.
Aren't doing the compromising? Does that player understand that it's the players who aren't doing the compromising? Every proposal we see, every offer we see from the owners seems to be more and more compromising. They seem to give more and more money, and it's the players that say, no, but this 30%, we want this. We're not compromising, we want this. Interesting. Assessing a path forward. Come to a mutual understanding on revenue sharing. A big part of the reason this stalemate is that the sides still do not see eye to eye value and is not too much. As Nafisa Collier told ESPN this month. We just got done saying that they lost money 3 decades in a row, and Nafisa Collier is saying that that represents their value. I'm telling you folks, the arrival of Caitlin Clark has emboldened these ladies something fierce. The battery is in their back because they've had 2 years of respectable metrics. Viewership and attendance. Find a middle ground on housing.
Connecting the dots reveals why the league can ignore proposals for a month without consequence. At the end of the day, the players need the league more than the league needs any individual player. Even Caitlin Clark, as transformative as she's been, doesn't change 3 decades of economic reality. One player doesn't erase 28 years of losses, and the owners have seen this before. Brief spikes in interest followed by regression to the mean. They're not restructuring the entire economic model based on 2 years of Clark-driven growth. Here's the quote that captures everything. Budge Wilson told ESPN, 30% of gross revenue represents our value and is not too much. But value isn't determined by what you think you deserve. Value is determined by what you bring in. If you bring in $100 million in revenue but cost $130 million to operate, your value is negative $30 million. That's not opinion, that's math. And the owners know the figures like the back of their hands. The arrival of Caitlin Clark has absolutely emboldened these players something fierce. That's not criticism, that's observation. They've tasted mainstream relevance. They've experienced what it feels like to have SportsCenter lead with WNBA highlights. They've seen arenas packed with fans who actually know the roster. And after 28 years of being treated like the NBA's little sister project, they want to be treated like equals. But equality in treatment requires equality in economics. And that's where the disconnect lives. The players want to be treated like they're in a major professional sports league with major professional sports league economics. The owners are saying, show us the economics first, then we'll talk about the treatment. Because right now, the numbers don't support the demands. Attendance spiked because of one generational talent, not because of systematic league growth. The media rights deal only exists because the NBA negotiates it as part of their package. Viewership numbers are impressive relative to WNBA history, but they're still a fraction of what other professional leagues generate. So what happens next? Either the players come back with a realistic proposal that acknowledges economic reality, or we're headed for a work stoppage. And if there's a work stoppage, if the 2026 season gets delayed or canceled, you know who loses. The players. Because the momentum they've built, the mainstream attention they finally achieved, that evaporates the moment games stop being played. Casual fans don't stick around for labor disputes. They don't follow CBA negotiations. They don't care about gross revenue versus net revenue debates. They move on to something else. March Madness, NBA playoffs, anything that's actually playing games. And when the WNBA comes back, if it comes back, those casual fans are gone. The window of relevance closes, and we're back to 46,000 viewers and half-empty arenas. The players think they can afford to hold out because they have leverage, but they're operating on maybe a 2-year window of mainstream relevance before the Caitlin Clark effect fades, and we're back to baseline. They can't afford to waste a season. Yet, they're acting like they can. Here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask out loud. Who's right? The players demanding to be paid like professionals in a major sports league, or the owners refusing to commit to economic suicide by agreeing to revenue splits that don't make mathematical sense. You can't say both. One side is living in reality, and one side is living in aspiration. The players say they deserve NBA treatment. The owners say you don't have NBA economics. The players say we're finally relevant. The owners say you've been relevant for 2 years out of 28. The players say Caitlin Clark changed everything. The owners say one player doesn't change 3 decades of losses. Both sides have valid points, but only one side controls whether the league continues operating. This negotiation is about to determine whether the WNBA builds on its momentum or squanders the best opportunity it's ever had. And right now, we're 90 days from tip-off with no CBA, no agreement, no path forward. Just 2 sides dug in, waiting for the other to blink first. If you want to understand how this plays out, if you want to see what happens when aspiration meets economic reality, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because we're tracking every development in this standoff. And when one side finally breaks, when someone finally compromises, you'll know about it here first. We're also diving deep into what a potential work stoppage would actually mean for the league's long-term viability. That video drops next, so drop your thoughts below. Are the players right to demand more after finally generating mainstream attention? Or are the owners right to refuse demands that don't align with financial reality? Because however this ends, it's going to reshape the WNBA's future. Either we see unprecedented player compensation in a league that's never turned a profit, or we see the momentum from the Caitlin Clark era completely wasted over a negotiation neither side would compromise on. The next 90 days will tell us everything. Stay tuned.